In this video, I will cover evaluating functions, both for a given input and solving for an input for a given output. For the first 5 examples, we'll use these given functions. F of x equals the square root of x minus 2 and g of x equals x squared minus 2x. We'll find the values. For the first example, we'll find f of 20. Now this means that we need to plug in 20 for this x. So we need to match up this letter with the function. So since this is f, we use f of x. Since this is f of x, we're going to plug in 20 for the x value. When we plug in 20 for the x value, we have the square root of 20 minus 2. We subtract 20 minus 2 to get 18. Now we can simplify this radical, so we're going to do that. 18 is 9 times 2, so the square root of 18 is the square root of 9 times the square root of 2. Now the square root of 9 is 3, so this simplifies to 3 times the square root of 2. If you need more help on simplifying radicals, please look for my other video that shows you how to simplify radicals in much more detail. For our next example, we'll do g of negative 2. Now since this is g, we need to go to g of x, and our x is now negative 2. So we need to plug in negative 2 for every x in g of x. So we need to plug in negative 2 for this x and negative 2 for this x. Now it's important to have these parentheses around this negative 2 because you're squaring x, and x is negative 2. So you're really squaring this negative number to make it a positive number. So this becomes 4. And then here we have 2 times negative 2, which is negative 4. And then we have this negative here, so that is going to become plus 4 for an answer of 8. For our next example, we're going to find x if f of x equals 7. So you see the difference between c and a. We're still using the function f, but now we're given f of x, and we have to find x. So we're going to plug in the 7 for f of x. So we'll write it like this. 7 equals the square root of x minus 2. Substituted in 7 for f of x. And this way we can solve for x. We'll square both sides, and then we'll add 2 to both sides. So our x value is 51. For our next example, let's solve for x if g of x is 24. So we'll be using our g of x equation again, but instead of solving for g of x, or y value, we're going to solve for x. So we're going to plug in 24 for g of x. Now we see that we have a quadratic, and so we know that to solve quadratics, when there's an x term, we can do that by quadratic formula or factoring. So we're going to set it equal to 0 by subtracting 24 on both sides. And we can see that this is factorable. So we'll factor this. What two numbers multiply to negative 24 and add to negative 2? Negative 6 and positive 4. Now if you need more help with factoring, I do have another video that has a lot more in-depth on how to factor and using different methods. So here we can set our x minus 6 equal to 0 and our x plus 4 equal to 0 since these are the factors. And we can add 6 to both sides and subtract 4 on both sides to get our two solutions, x equals 6 and x equals negative 4. For our last example with these functions, let's do f of 2. So we know that this means that we need to plug in 2 for x. and we have to use function f, so we're going to plug in 2 for x into this function. So we have the square root of 2 minus 2, which is 0, and we know that the square root of 0 is 0, because 0 times 0 is 0. Now let's look at another function, and I'll do 2 more examples of a function that has a fraction. In this example, we're given that h of x is equal to negative 2/5 x minus 1, and we're asked to calculate h of 15. So a lot of time you'll see evaluate, but you may also see calculate. By the way, thank you for choosing Math with Caroline. Please give a thumbs up if you're learning, and subscribe and share this video with your friends. So we know that we're going to substitute 15 in for x. Now we know that 5 goes into 15 3 times, so we can go ahead and simplify this. This will save you a lot of work if you always simplify before you multiply. So now we can just do negative 2 times 3, and we don't have to do negative 2 times 15 and then divide by 5. So negative 2 times 3 is negative 6 minus 1 will give us our final answer of negative 7. Let's do one more example. Our next example is solve h of x equals 3. Now these directions look a little bit different than the directions we just did, where it said find the value of x if h of x was equal to some number. So now this is not telling you solve for x, it's just saying solve. So you need to understand that does mean the same thing, solve for x. H of x is 3, not x, but the y value essentially. So we'll plug in the 3 here, and we'll solve for x. So we'll add 1 to both sides. And then the best thing to do would be to multiply both sides by the reciprocal of your fraction. Because that way, this will all divide out, and you'll just be left with x. Now when you're multiplying these fractions, 2 goes into 4 2 times. So again, instead of multiplying negative 5 times 4 and dividing by 2, we can just simplify from the beginning, and we can just multiply negative 5 times 2. And then x will equal negative 10. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please leave a comment. I would love to hear from you.